This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990, February 9th, 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification, basically ending World War II. And Gorbachev said, that's very important. Yes, NATO doesn't move, and we agreed to German unification. The U.S. then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on basically a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power, and Clinton was the first agent of this. And the expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. At that point, Russia didn't much care. There was no border other than with the Königsberg, but other than that, there was no direct threat. Then the U.S. led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was bad, by the way, because that was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart. The Russians didn't like that very much. But Putin became president, they swallowed it, they complained, but even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. Then 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. But then came 2 other decisive actions. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. This was probably the most decisive event, never discussed in this context. But what it did was trigger the U.S. putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat. In 2004-05, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election, and he became president in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. That calmed things down because the U.S. was pushing NATO, but the people of Ukraine on the opinion polls didn't even want to be in NATO. They knew that the country is divided between ethnic Ukrainian, ethnic Russian. What do we want with this? We want to stay away from your problems. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. A typical U.S. regime change operation, have no doubt about it. And the Russians did us a favor. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland, my colleague at Columbia University now, between her and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piot, who's a senior State Department official till today. And they talked about regime change. They said, who's going to be the next government? All of this is to say, the U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. It's been, by the way, I forgot to mention, in 2004, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. And then, okay, it's a long story, but the U.S. kept rejecting the basic idea, don't expand NATO to Russia's border in a context where we're putting in goddamn missile systems after breaking a treaty. 2019, we walked out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. On December 15, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. You can find it online. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. I called the White House that next week after that, begging them, take the negotiations. Putin's offered something, avoid this war. Oh, Jeff, there's not going to be a war. Announce that NATO's not going to enlarge. Oh, don't worry, NATO's not going to enlarge. I said, oh, you're going to have a war over something that's not going to happen? Why don't you announce it? And he said, no, our policy is an open door. This is Jake Sullivan. Our policy is an open door policy. Open door for NATO enlargement. That is under the category of bullshit, by the way. You don't have your right to put your military bases anywhere you want and expect peace in this world. They turned down the negotiations. Then the special military operation started. And 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality. And then the United States and Britain said, no way. You guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front. You're all going to die. But we got your back as we kept pushing them into the front lines. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave.
This is Ecclesiasticus 5:15. Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small. Kahala Yahweh Bashim El Shai, Bashim Rakwadash, which are the true names of the Most High Father, Yahweh, which is Hebrew for He is, and Yahweh Shai, which is Hebrew for He is salvation, He delivers. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who are the house of David reborn again in this generation. And shalom to the 1/3 of Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about the events which are quickly boiling over there in the East, in Ukraine, and ultimately in Europe, and how this will lead to the biblical Third World War known as Armageddon. So, as we just watched in that video, I wanted to let everybody know and share it just so we could all be aware of what's really going on over there in Ukraine, right? Because Esau likes to distort the truth, and he wants to make everybody believe that America is over there to try to save Ukraine and, spare democracy, when Ukraine has suspended the elections. They've closed down the other political parties. Pretty much it's been taken over by a dictatorship, and it's because there's multiple things going on in Ukraine. One, it's being used as a bullwhip against Russia by the NATO and Western forces, and also it's going to be harvested of the $11 trillion of resources that are in the ground, and then on top of all that, it's going to be repopulated by one of its original inhabitants, that being the Edomite, or the top tribe of Edom, the Ashkenazi Khazars, which ultimately go back to the biblical Edomites, the top tribe of the Edom that is known as the Amalekites. Okay, because that's what the Israelis' true biblical identity are. They're Amalek. Okay, even though they like to call everybody else that they want to destroy Amalek, they themselves are the Amalekites. Okay, now that being said, if you've been listening to the news, you know that Ukraine has launched long-range missiles into Russia, which has, for the most part, put the world on a teetering point to World War III. Let's go and read this article, and let's just get a real quick recap of where the world stands when it comes to World War III. It says, is Biden trying to start World War III before he leaves? And the answer is yes. You see, and it's not because he's doing it against Trump. No, these devils are both working on the same team. They just pretend to be two different sides. Okay, Biden, going on his way out of office, has nothing to lose, so he's going to destroy all his social credit, right? Meaning he's going to basically burn his bridges because he ain't never coming back. Okay, so what is he going to do? He's going to be, more likely they're going to use him to start the war, and that way when Trump comes into office, he could then play dumb and be like, well, there's nothing I could do. I got to finish what was started. And this is where you're going to see America just kind of just be full-fledged into a war against Russia and be committed to actions over there. So let's continue. It says, tens of millions of Americans breathed a sigh of relief when President Donald Trump defeated Vice President Kamala Harris, rightfully believing that the peace and global stability of Trump's first term would return. It appears, however, that President Joe Biden is hell-bent on doing everything he can to push us to the brink of World War III before he leaves office. Now, again, notice how they try to pin this on Joe Biden, right? Like I said. And remember, Joe Biden, he's not running shit, right? He's off in the corner eating ice cream and getting lost in jungles, okay? He ain't making any decisions. The people who are making decisions are his cabinet. And when you look at Biden's cabinet, it's all full of Amalek, okay? It's ran by the Israelis. Now, that being said, these are going to be the same people who are going to be running, for the most part, Donald Trump's cabinet, right? You're going to have some, American first, candidates in there, but for the most part, it's going to be Amalek at the steering wheel. Now, that being said, let's continue. It says, green lighting a dangerous plan to allow Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range missiles. Now, besides America, you also had the UK and France, or basically NATO, also green light Ukraine to use the long-range missiles, which they had already given Ukraine. You see, so this is how these devils work, right? In this case, they gave all the long-range weapons to the Ukrainians. They just told them they couldn't use them, right? And then when it was time to put that into action, then they gave them the green light. And what we're seeing transpire now is what's happening. It says, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, Edomite, has issued a fresh threat to Russia, emboldened by the Biden regime's reckless decision to permit Ukraine to carry out long-range missile strikes deep inside Russian territory. The Gateway pundit reported on Saturday that Biden would allow Ukraine to use a powerful American long-range weapon for strikes inside Russia, supposedly in response to North Korea's recent aid to Russia in the form of thousands of troops. And again, if you're not aware, North Korea recently sent like 10,000 troops over there to Ukraine, or on the front lines of the Russia-Ukraine war, to assist the Russians fighting the Ukrainians. It says, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has already made it crystal clear that Russians will willingly to use nuclear weapons in the event that long-range missiles are used to strike targets inside Russia. Putin has also made it clear that United States and NATO partners who authorize such strikes will be at war with Russia. Check that out. That right there is the point, right? So, it's no secret that Ukraine isn't fighting this war alone. Okay, they're simply the nerdy kid being held up by the bullies that are trying to attack the other bully. Okay, and the thing is that little nerdy shield kid is being decimated, right? And again, and that's all on purpose because Amalek, like I said, he's trying to move back into that land. So him turning Ukraine into a meat grinder for all the males there in Ukraine is not a problem for him. In fact, he wants to decimate the male population in Ukraine so that way he could simply come in and take over like what they're doing right now. If you want to look into it, just look at Israeli Orthodox Jews migrating to Ukraine, and you'll find a bunch of videos, bunch of articles showing how there's a large exodus out of Israel over there to the Ukraine. And even Zelensky is out there talking about he wants Ukraine to be another Israel, right? And so, like I said, that's a whole other lesson there. So right here, you can see RT report. It says Russia reserves right to resort to nuclear weapons if faced with threat, and that was a statement made by Putin. Okay, and again, like he said, that he wants to make it clear that the United States and NATO partners who authorize such strikes will be at war with Russia. Right, and again, like I said, it's not a secret that the U.S. and the NATO forces have basically been secretly attacking, Russia using the Ukrainian forces. They've even, the Russians have even killed some, I think they were like Army Rangers or Army Green Berets, something like that, right? But, they laid out their bodies and took photos and showed the whole world that there are U.S. Special Forces, including Navy SEALs, there in Ukraine fighting the Russian army. So, and it says, the voices of peace here in the United States were appalled at the action. Some U.S. political figures reacted in similar horror and alarm, also warning of the risk of the outbreak of World War III. With such a decision, Donald Trump sees this as an ultra-dangerous ploy by the lame duck Biden administration to escalate the war just prior to Trump taking office. The military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure they get World War III going before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives, he said on X Sunday, immediately after reports of the serious policy shift emerged. And House Representatives Thomas Massey has ripped Biden for once again circumventing Congress on matters of war, calling the decision an unconstitutional act of war that endangers the lives of all U.S. citizens. And that's because these devils don't care, man. This is Psalms 10 and 5. His ways are always grievous. Thy judgments are far above out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. And this here is ultimately talking about the wicked, right? These Edomites. Okay, Edomites being the biblical name for the so-called Caucasian and Israeli races. Okay, it says a dangerous few months, right? Because pretty much there's only 2 months left until Biden takes over. So it says global instability and civil unrest is likely to dramatically increase ahead of President Trump's inauguration, as the left does everything in their power to attempt to hold on to power. The response from the U.S. federal government to growing global and local instability are certainly concerning to experts like Dr. Peter McCullough, and Dr. McCullough's pointed out recently. It is becoming more clear that federal pandemic and disaster responses all over the world have taken authoritarian positions, indicating that the government is in control and the populace must be held at back, desperate and helpless, waiting for a big brother to save the citizenry. And that's ultimately what Esau wants, right? He wants to create the problem so that way he can offer his own solution, right? And that's why when Trump comes in, he's going to declare the national defense or national emergency declaration, the NED. And that right there, Akim, is pretty much martial law, okay? So when Trump comes in and he declares the national emergency because of the immigration, the military is going to come in and you're going to more likely see all these checkpoints get set up nationwide, and they're going to be checking for papers just like they did in Nazi Germany, and they're going to be basically cracking down. And then hence, what is it, 2nd Ezra 15 about not being able to go into cities is going to come to pass. That prophecy is going to play out, and people are going to be able to go into cities or go to places that they're not authorized to go to. And you see there's going to eventually be, like it said, citizen uprising and revolution, and people just being pissed off to the point where they're going to basically make certain zones no-go zones. So again, if you don't live in a certain city, you probably won't be allowed to go into the city to stop it from being looted, and vice versa. You won't be able to go into certain neighborhoods and whatnot unless you have the proper papers, or it could even be vaccine passports, but more likely it's going to be some sort of digital ID, right, that these devils are going to push, which are all going to tie to the mark of the beast. Continuing, it says, which is why Dr. McCullough urges Americans to be vigilant. More and more Americans and people are taking matters into their own hands with food, water, and emergency medical kits from the wellness company in place before the next disaster. Now here ultimately is this, medical kit, which it wouldn't be a bad idea, Akim, if you had the money to get this, because it basically gives you a lot of these, antibiotics and medicines that you need. So, going to Esau's fucking hospitals and, medical buildings now is pretty much, it's a risk, right? These devils have turned, the medical system into a weapon. So having something like this, or even getting your own, medication, your own resources would not be a bad idea. Just like the apostle said, man, it's good to be prepared, but don't expect that to save you, right? That's also what we need the Lord to provide us with that hedge. And just so that you understand what took place this last weekend, it says, Ukraine attack strike on Russia comes after Putin's lower threshold for nukes. And so this is basically what these are, right? These are the U.S.-made long-range missiles that are shot from these vehicles, right? And so right here you got Ukraine. This dark area here in Ukraine is ultimately the place that Russia has occupied or taken over. And this area here in red is where these missiles can actually strike, right? That's 200 miles, inland. So, and I believe it's up here where they got struck, or it basically hit. Let's actually go take a look real quick. Yeah, look, check it out. So this is right here in Ukraine, and actually this is where they hit. It was about 150 miles, or basically 200 miles is where they basically hit over here, right? And it says ATACMS flew more than 140 kilometers and hit a target in the Bansk region of Russia. This means that the strike permit applies not only to the China, as the Western media wrote about it. This attack also showed that the air defense of the Russian Federation will have big problems with Ukrainian missiles. Meanwhile, Alkonat Medvedev threatens a nuclear attack on Kiev and NATO countries. Right, and people are saying that more likely it's going to be Germany that gets hit. Right, Russia's already come out and shown maps of the likely targets, and it would hit basically Germany. I think it was Germany, France, and England would get like the biggest onslaught for it to be targeted by Russia, right? So you see how this thing is heating up. This is Zephaniah 3:8. Therefore, wait ye upon me, saith Yahweh Bashim Shai, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. So all this stuff going on, Akim, we being in this truth, knowing who we are, we don't have to worry about this, okay? The only thing we have to worry about is that we're doing the work, we're making sure that we're, cleansing ourselves, we're doing, we're praying, we're asking the Lord to watch over us, and, prepare. Get a little bit of extra food, a little bit of medication if you need some, but make sure that you're going to be prepared, because these devils are they're going to go all out. They're going to do too much. They're going to be taking out the lights. They're going to be causing famines, right? Remember, that's what it prophesies in the Bible. There's going to be famines and want of water, all these things, man. So again, make sure that we're taken care of. And of course, the Lord's going to put it into your spirit to get what you need. So that being said, trust your feelings. Trust, when the Lord puts you in situations where you're able to get a little extra, or you come up on something, take advantage of it, okay? Right now is the time that the Lord is about to thrust us in to Jacob's trouble. Again, remember, when Trump comes in and he declares that national emergency, that's martial law. Okay, we're going to start seeing military or National Guards deployed. Things are going to get locked down, and then pretty much everybody's going to have to show their IDs, their papers, to verify that they aren't one of these illegal immigrants that came over. And again, it's not just for Latinos that are going to be getting harassed, right? Remember, there are more than just Latinos that came over the border. There was Indians, there was Russians, there were Ukrainians, there was Egyptians, there were Nigerians, there were everybody, Chinese, and Japanese. Everybody came over on the borders, which means now everybody in the United States can now be a suspect. Okay, so consider that. This is Romans 13 and 11, and that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. So that pretty much speaks for itself, Akim. I'm sure a lot of you already know this, right? I'm preaching to the choir, but for anybody who stumbled upon this video, just understand that we are living in the last days of the last days, and the only way you're going to make it through is by getting right with the Lord. There is no other way you're going to be able to get through all this and not believe or be one of the elects of the Lord. All right, so hopefully this video was edifying. Until the next time, I want to give all honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Rakakodash. Shalom.